Hi, I'm here in a mountain forest in Switzerland, and my goal for today is to take pictures of different species of tits, of the spotted nutcracker and of squirrels. And as you can see, I'm here in the middle of the winter, not necessarily because I enjoy the freezing temperatures here, but rather because the birds, they need more food in winter just because it's colder, and in some locations like here they get tame and they come to people to get some food, so it's important to only feed them like high quality bird food. And this is a nice occasion to observe some birds and take some pictures, and that's what I want to show you in this video, some nice bird footage and some tips for taking pictures of them. So in photography, light is very important, so let's start with light and the weather. I think overcast days like this are almost perfect because you have like very soft contrasts, nice colors, you don't have problems with harsh shadows, and that's not only affecting the bird or the squirrel that you take pictures of, but also in the background. If you have more sunlight and more light and shadows, the background looks a bit more distracting, whereas on days like this it looks just softer. And usually I try to take pictures of the birds when they are on branches with a nice dark green background. But on days like this, where you have so much nice and fresh snow, I sometimes also go down on the ground and try to take pictures from the squirrels when they're jumping in the snow. I think this gives even more a wintry feeling. And speaking of wintry feeling, what also helps, of course, if it's snowing. I love to go out when it's snowing, especially when you have these big, thick, white snowflakes, and if you then shoot with a telephoto lens that kind of compresses this, and in ideal case you shoot against a dark background, it gives this really different wintry and nice mood. And the snow also helps to lighten up the image a bit because the light is being reflected, and this is quite important because in the forest here it can get quite dark, especially in these coniferous forests. Like this one is dominated by spruce, and even during the day you will shoot with a high ISO all the time. And in the afternoon, when the light is getting a bit softer and the sun is going further down, I also like direct sunlight actually. Not necessarily direct sunlight on the bird, but more on the background. Because especially if you shoot a bit backlit, what you can get then is some really nice flares and some colors in the image. But again, I would not try this during the day, like at 12 o'clock, because then the contrast will be too harsh and it will just look bright and white. Whereas if you do this in the evening, like half an hour or 1 hour before sunset, you might have really nice colors. One of the most interesting species here, I think, is the spotted nutcracker. And the name already tells a lot about the bird. So it's a black bird with white spots on it. And the bird lives in coniferous forests close to the timber line, so mostly dominated by spruce and, more importantly, the Swiss pine. And the bird is actually very important for the Swiss pine because in autumn it collects the seeds, eats some of them, but it also creates a stock for winter. So it hides some of the seeds in the ground, and even when there is snow like today, it can still find up to 80% of the seeds. But this also means that around 20% of the seeds are not recovered, and in the next year they can start to germinate and a new tree can grow. So actually the nutcracker is really important for the distribution of the Swiss pine. And many people did not know that, especially in earlier times, and they also shot the nutcracker, especially hunters and foresters, because they were afraid that it would kill the Swiss pine because it was collecting all its seeds. And unlike in the US and many other countries, we only have one national park in Switzerland, and there the spotted nutcracker is actually the symbol of the national park. Another cool species is the alpine tit, which is a subspecies that only occurs in the Alps, as the name might suggest, and visually it looks the same as the other subspecies, but the song is different. And here also some other tits occur. My favorite is still the crested tit, and it's really a pleasure seeing them flying around and sometimes coming to your hand to get some food. Now let's get back to photography. This time we talk a bit about the equipment. So in general, if I take pictures of birds and other animals, I prefer telephoto lenses, just because with telephoto lenses you can really separate the subject from the background, and I think this helps to have a more outstanding image. Here I have shot in the past with my 500mm f4 and then with my 600mm f4. It's a good choice, but I also need to say, if I shoot smaller birds like the tits, I have a bigger magnification, and this also means that my depth of field gets really shallow. It's certainly personal preference how small you want your depth of field. Personally, I don't care so much if the tail is getting a bit blurry, but I prefer if a large portion of the bird is still sharp. Therefore, I usually stop down my 600mm f4 to f5.6 or 6.3. So this actually also means you don't need a fast, expensive super telephoto for these occasions. Something cheaper like 150 to 600 or 100 to 500 might work as well. And the zoom actually gives you a bit of flexibility because the nutcracker is much bigger than a small tit, and with my 600mm sometimes I need to walk a bit back and forth. What I have been enjoying lately quite a lot is the 400mm f4.5 from Nikon. It's a super sharp lens, and the advantage that I see here is that it's very light. I mean, it's actually lighter than the camera that is behind, so great for walking around. And with 400mm f4.5 I still get a decent blurry background, and as I said, I don't need to stop down more, which I would need to do if I would have a 400 2.8. In these coniferous forests it can be quite dark. This means I usually need to raise my ISO a bit because, as I said, I don't want to shoot with f2.8 even if I had a f2.8 lens. And the shutter speed, well, it depends. If you have a nutcracker that is sitting on a thick branch, you can go down to like 100th or even an 80th of a second handheld. This is fine. But if you have a small tit that is also perched on a smaller branch that moves a bit up and down and the tit is moving more erratically, you will need a shorter shutter speed to freeze the action, maybe 1/500th of a second. And don't even get me started if you want to try to take some pictures of the nutcrackers in flight. I would make sure to rather raise the ISO in camera to get a properly exposed image rather than keeping the ISO low and having an underexposed image that you need to kind of push in post. Usually this pushing in post is giving you worse image quality than just raising the ISO directly in the camera to get a correct exposure. As I said, there are not only birds in this forest, there's also squirrels. And the squirrels are incredibly cute, and especially in winter when they have these fur tips on the ears, they look amazing if they jump through the snow. So I definitely want to get some pictures of these. As you might know, squirrels usually eat a lot of nuts and other seeds, like from pine cones, but not exclusively. They are actually omnivores, so they eat a bit everything they can find, and a large part of the diet is based on nuts, but sometimes they also might go for a bird egg that they can find. And I've also seen one a couple of years ago here that was feeding on a wing of a bird. Well, I don't think the squirrel was actually hunting the bird because it was quite a big wing, but probably the bird was already dead and it was taking the opportunity to feed on it. Let's go back to the equipment one more time. I mentioned before that I like telephoto lenses for separating the subject from the background, but lately I've also been experimenting a bit more with shorter focal length, for example with my 50mm 1.8 and 35mm 1.8, because there you can include a bit more of the environment. And it's definitely more challenging because more things have to fit, like the background really needs to be almost perfect, otherwise the image will look distracting, and you need to get quite close to the bird or to the squirrel, that's for sure. But you can get kind of different pictures, more unique pictures. At least that's what I think. So let me know in the comments, what do you think about these pictures? Do you prefer these or more the classic telephoto ones? Let me know in the comments, and see you in the next video.